The long shadows of the morning sun stretched across Harvard Yard as Ibrahim Traoré stepped from the black sedan. A stark contrast to the ivy-covered buildings surrounding him was his simple military fatigues. 3 weeks ago, the invitation had arrived. To address the Global Leadership Summit was a rare honor for an African leader. In clusters, students whispered, their phones already capturing his arrival. Against his shoulders pressed the weight of history as he walked the same paths once tread by presidents and Nobel laureates. Not just as Burkina Faso's leader would he speak today, but as Africa's voice. Inside the grand auditorium, the mahogany seats were filled with 500 of the world's brightest minds. From 6 continents, diplomats, professors, and business leaders had gathered for this unprecedented event. Every word seemed to be judged by the chandeliers above before it was spoken. Ibrahim noticed the subtle divisions. Clustered together were the African attendees, isolated from the main discussions. Last on the program, he was listed after presentations on modern democracy and economic development models. The underlying message he sensed: Africa would be heard, but only when the real speakers were finished. With nervous energy crackling around her, Dr. Margaret Chun, the summit coordinator, approached. "President Traoré, honored we are to have you here," she said, her handshake firm but brief. "After Professor Whitman's keynote on sustainable governance comes your 15-minute slot." The time limit stung. A minimum of 30 minutes had been given to other speakers. With academic precision, she glanced at her watch. Particularly eager is the audience to hear your perspective on challenges facing developing nations. Everything about how they viewed his homeland was revealed by the careful phrasing. As Ibrahim took his designated seat in the front row, he felt the familiar fire building in his chest. About speaking to Harvard's elite, this wasn't just. It was about dismantling decades of condescension with truth. On drone the introductory speakers about theories and statistics, never mentioning the real people behind the data. Of the farmers in Ouagadougou he thought, the students in Boso, the mothers in Banora. Through these hallowed halls, their stories would echo today. To Harvard had come the revolution. His wire-rimmed glasses adjusted, Professor Harrison Whitman III surveyed the auditorium with practiced superiority. At 63, his reputation had been built on economic theories about failed states and underdeveloped societies. Bestseller lists across Western universities were topped by his latest book, The Burden of Governance. As gospel truth, students hung on his every word, treating his opinions to almost mythical status among academic circles had the Harvard Economics Department elevated him. As another opportunity to showcase his intellectual dominance over lesser minds, he viewed today's summit. Backstage, as he reviewed his notes, updates about the African president in attendance were whispered by Whitman's assistant. "Some military upstart from Burkina Faso," he muttered dismissively, not bothering to learn Ibrahim's name. On why African leaders consistently failed their people through corruption and incompetence would his speech focus. Lost on him was the irony, speaking about Africa without ever truly listening to Africans. With charts showing GDP failures and democracy rankings where his PowerPoint slides filled. Yet considered himself an expert on its problems, he had never set foot on African soil. Onto the stage walking, Whitman commanded attention with his tailored suit and confident stride. Polite applause was offered by the audience as he began his presentation on sustainable governance in emerging economies. The authority of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in every room was carried by his voice. Within minutes, with surgical precision, he was dissecting African leadership failures. A picture of incompetence and backwardness was painted by each statistic he quoted. With every nod of agreement from his academic peers, his smugness grew. 20 minutes into his presentation, Whitman noticed Ibrahim sitting calmly in the front row. Unsettled him did something about the young African leader's steady gaze, though he couldn't pinpoint why. No reaction was shown by the man to the indirect criticisms being hurled at his continent. Instead of the expected defensiveness, an expression of patient observation was held on Ibrahim's face. Compelled to be more direct, felt Whitman, to provoke some reaction from this silent figure. Especially from those he considered beneath his station, his ego demanded acknowledgement of his intellectual superiority. With a flourish, Professor Whitman concluded his presentation, clicking to his final slide about leadership accountability. Polite but enthusiastic was the applause, exactly what he expected from his academic peers. As the floor for questions was opened by the moderator, Whitman's eyes locked onto Ibrahim once again. Gnawing at him throughout his entire speech had been something about the African leader's composed silence. The perfect moment to assert his intellectual dominance publicly, he decided this was. Silent fell the auditorium as Whitman prepared to speak again. Before we move to the next speaker, Whitman announced, his voice cutting through the hushed atmosphere. Compelled I feel to address the elephant in the room regarding African leadership failures. Making his target unmistakably clear to everyone present, his gaze fixed directly on Ibrahim, uncomfortably shifted the audience, sensing the tension building in the prestigious hall. Here today we have someone who embodies exactly the kind of governance challenges I've been discussing. As the confrontation escalated beyond academic discourse, student phones began recording. Panicked looked the moderator, unsure how to intervene in this unexpected public attack. Louder and more condescending grew Whitman's voice with each word he spoke. Perhaps instead of attending Harvard summits, back to Burkina Faso you should go and fix your own house first. In the air hung the words like a physical slap across Ibrahim's face. Throughout the auditorium, gasps echoed as the insult registered with the stunned audience. From their seats rose several African diplomats, their faces showing shock and outrage. Smugly behind his podium stood the professor, seemingly pleased with his inflammatory declaration. Uncomfortable with the blatant disrespect he had just displayed looked even his supporters. Deafening was the silence that followed, broken only by the sound of shifting chairs and whispered conversations. Seated remained Ibrahim, his expression unchanged, though his knuckles had whitened slightly as he gripped his chair. With her microphone fumbled the moderator, desperately trying to restore order to the chaos Whitman had created. Every angle of the humiliation was captured by cameras, already preparing to broadcast this moment worldwide. In what he believed was his intellectual victory over the African leader basked the professor, a force that would reshape everything had he just awakened, and he had no idea.